Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the System2 Podcast. I have the pleasure of speaking with Ben Webb, who is the founder and CEO of Above Data. Above Data works with marketers, with hedge funds, but I think crucially, Ben and I were just talking about before we hit record, which is that Above Data is not afraid of PII, whereas a lot of other data providers are. So, Ben, can you say more about that and why that's the case?
Yeah, so a lot of our backgrounds from most of our founding team, is we came from the marketing ecosystem. So we were all at a company called LiveRamp, which you may or may not know just got bought by Publicis for $2.2 billion. So we founded and built the data marketplace business, which represented about 25% of LiveRamp's revenue. The other parts are clean rooms and identity. But core to that is everything we grew up with and everything we knew was dealing with PII and how to be good stewards of that, how to make sure that we were doing all the right ethical things around not even just moving the data, but sourcing the right data when we were building the marketplace business. So that's sort of just ingrained in everything that we do, and knowing how to silo it, knowing how to source it, knowing how to have the right privacy and legal barriers in place to make sure you're doing everything ethically. So to us, like to some people, that's scary. But to us, I think sort of taking a step back and looking at the data economy more broadly, we saw that as opportunity. Our thesis was that really the same core underlying signal with very similar infrastructure can service two very different buyers, both being a hedge fund looking for insights and analytics, as well as a marketer looking for marketing audiences for activation. So the PII piece for us was really something that we knew we could handle, and we knew that could potentially be a differentiator as we're building out this new type of business.
Tell us more about the data that you guys are working off of.
Yeah, so it's the type of data, really, it's sort of looking again like kind of the data economy broadly speaking, is a lot of data that is out there is really built for conclusions, right? It's built from raw data, but someone has to make a decision on what that means, how it gets packaged, and ultimately someone puts it on a shelf. So for us, we think the raw underlying data in a different way. We're really focused on the methodology. We're focused on the type of data itself. So we're building data products from focused on evidence, right? So that's a whole different way that we're trying to bring this unique signal to market. So the things we care about are deterministic events. An event to us is something that is a unique user. There's some sort of timestamp and a behavior. The behavior could be a transaction, could be a visit, could be a click, could be the show you watched on Netflix. Any of those real events tied to a consumer behavior, that's the type of information that we are most focused on piping through our ecosystem and making available to different types of buyers.
And in terms of, yes, you mentioned a lot of different categories of data there, whether it's clicks, transactions. Are you guys under the hood partnering with other providers that have access to that data, and you guys are building the event ontology on top of it, or what? Where exactly do you guys fit into the process?
Yeah, great question. So kind of going back to our backgrounds in the original business we built at LiveRamp, which that marketplace is now the most successful in marketing. Almost $1 billion of data flows through that marketplace. We worked with over 200 different data companies there. So being able to source data, having all those relationships is just, again, sort of ingrained in us. So to answer your question specifically, one of our unique positionings is we feel is like this governance layer that we build. So we're not just licensing the data and packaging it all together and making it available. We have to deal with different business rules. Like you can use this data for A, but you can't use it for B. Or it has to be sized to this amount before you can share it. Or it has to be modeled. Like all of these constraints we can deal with. So that allows us to source data from our partners, which could be first party, could be data from a retailer, could be data from a CPG, it could be data from an app, or it could be data from a third-party aggregator. So we deal with sources of data from any place. The focus, though, is just the data needs to be deterministic and it needs to be raw and tied to like a real consumer event. That's the type of data that matters to us, not something that's already been prepackaged, that someone's made decisions that it's this thing. It's kind of a black box sitting on a shelf. It's like, that's what we don't want. That's sort of the old world where it was built for humans to reason. It's like browse a catalog for data. We're more like, no, let's start with the raw events. And if we can make the events queryable, then you can package up whatever you want. And the source just becomes embedded into the agent that allows you to navigate the data without being an expert. So we're trying to put all of that into a nice little package that allows the data really to surface when it makes sense for the buyer.
And going back to that PII point, a lot of other data providers aggregate the data. So they'll tell you credit card sales across the retailer. They might do some cohort analysis. They might break down a little bit, but it's generally aggregated. You guys are more focused on that individual and like cause and effect around events. So that's why you need to have the data at the individual level. But then that goes back to having good PII protections in place to make sure that you're doing everything in a compliant way. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Because again, like if you think about the traditional places where you can buy data today, whether it's an audience or a cohort or something, it's people that are in market for Ford F-150. Well, what does that mean? Aside from the little one-line blurb you wrote about, I don't know. Whereas like I just want to go to my data and say, oh, these are actual deterministic Ford F-150 owners, or people that had service on a Ford F-150, or people that bought an aftermarket part for a Ford F-150, right? These are the sorts of determinists, or people that searched or went to a website about Ford F-150s. Like those are the deterministic, or watched or saw an ad for a Ford F-150, right? All of those are real events tied to real things that I can then pull back and help a user navigate that. It's like, oh, are you interested in intent? Are you interested in purchase? What are you interested in? And then we can sort of guide that person to create the right recipe, if you will, on top of that data to pull the right signal from the different owners into a package that makes sense for them.
And what kind of data package makes sense for someone in marketing? What's a common use case that marketers use your data for to do a better job?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it really depends. Like the answer is that's one of the we have an agent specialized in that because it's complicated. So you might be doing conquesting, your Baja Blast, which is a sub flavor of Mountain Dew, and you're looking at conquesting, getting new customers. So you're going to go, steal customers from Starry or from some other group, right? To try to bring them to your brand. You might be launching a new brand. So you're trying to look at the broader category. How do I bring more customers to this new product that I'm launching within this bigger category? Or it could just be awareness where I just want people to know, like, this new toothpaste. I'm Colgate. I have a new toothpaste. I just want you to know about my brand. I just want you to know that I exist. I'm not trying to drive you to do anything. I just want you to feel some sort of emotion or feel some sort of happiness when it comes to my brand. So there's all sorts of different marketing techniques when it comes to this data, but core underlying is thinking about where you are in the marketing funnel. And generally, the closer you are to a purchase, the more important the data gets. And like something tied to a real behavior, like a real event, becomes really important. And so for certain companies, you think about retailers, you think about even like a McDonald's or a car company, anything where there's like, LG, Samsung, like where you're purchasing a real good, like that, this purchase behavior history becomes really important for them because it's a real thing that happened. It's like, oh, I purchased your competitor's TV, or I'm searching for your competitor's TV. Like those are real events that if you can harness those, you can find those, become very actionable to whether you're just using them directly or you're maybe using them as a model, using that as a predictive model, building propensities, and sort of looking for other people within the, sort of US population that have that similar behavior. Because a lot of this data struggles from the problem of not a ton of scale. We're dealing with sometimes very small sets of people that have the specific behavior because it's all deterministic. It's all real events. But, with all the techniques we have now about using models and building propensities, we can certainly find people that look alike and we can expand that. So very similar to how a Meta or, a Google are doing their core lookalike modeling within their platform off of their own signals. We're applying very similar techniques to the data that we sit on as well.
I was actually going to get to that point. Do the types of marketers who use you guys versus just going on the Meta platform, they tend to be a little bit more technical, more sophisticated? They want the ability to go more granular on these data sets versus these large platforms that don't give you that kind of transparency into what's happening under the hood?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, there's a reason why Meta and Google and Amazon drive most of media dollars is because they have amazing data. and they can do so much with it. And it's at this granular event level, and they've created it. So it's like they don't run into these normalization, fragmentation issues that the rest of the ecosystem deals with. But when it comes to certain things, like when it comes to transactions, real, like some of these other events that are happening in your TV set or in like the grocery store or in Home Depot, like they don't have visibility into that. And so as a sophisticated marketer, you're correct. You want an edge. You want something that's different than what is being offered in Meta. You want to be able to load your own data, your own signal into those platforms. But then that might be a seed that you then apply as a lookalike to the rest of Meta's population. But there's been many studies show that that is a much higher ROI on that data than if you're just using the Meta or the Google data natively. Is if you can bring your own signal, your own customers, your own users, or whatever, your own first-party data, you're going to have a better outcome. And honestly, you're going to save money on media. Like media is expensive these days.
So your point is that if I'm a marketer and I'm using above data to get a better sense of some of these events that I'm interested in, and I take that list of like that segment and then apply it on Meta and have Meta find me a bunch of lookalikes, that's a lot more capital efficient than if I go straight to Meta and try to go in there and find the people directly through there.
Exactly. So for an example would be if you think about if you've ever poked around any of these, I don't know if you have, but like you go into Meta and you're like, let's say you're a wine brand, like you're an Argentinian wine brand, something like sort of bespoke. And you're like, I'm looking for wine buyers. So I go into Meta and I'm like, okay, great, wine buyers. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Well, what kind of wine? Premium wine, single purchase? Like, are they loyal? Like, what category? Like, there's all sorts of questions you can't answer with that data. Like, they'll be like wine or they'll talk about wine. But really, if you think about it, if you could go to a better source, because you're Argentinian, like people that have purchased your competitors or know what Argentinian wine even is, or maybe they understand it's a premium price point, like all of those nuances you can't really do inside of these platforms because it's sort of like it is what it is. But if you're able to define that on the input, now you have maybe it's a seed of only 1,000 or 2,000 people, which is like sort of the minimum threshold that Meta can make something work out of that data. Now you've got like sort of the gold standard people, and they can apply that basically hashed email across all the other variables that they have for that individual that has purchased your competitor's Argentinian wine in the past. You're like, oh, I know they have kids. I know they have a BMW. I know they more likely to live in South Florida than they are to live in Texas or whatever it is, right? But that's all the rich variables they have natively on those people. They can find other people that look like them. And like that is it's a proven strategy to work really well for a lot of marketers.
And why not, if I'm a brand, why not just upload a list of my actual customers into Meta and find lookalikes? Is the idea here that I can be more specific and just find one of my competitors' customers that's never bought from me and then build a lookalike off of that? Or why not just start with my customers as a seed?
Sure. For customers that have amazing first-party data, yes, they absolutely should do that, and they do. However, we know that there are certain categories, CPG being a great one, where they don't own a lot of their customers. Like that's Walmart or that's Target or that's Whole Foods. Like they know who their customers are. They don't. And so you get into this data fragmentation issue that there's all these little silos of data that exist everywhere, and they're tiny little slices here and there. So you start getting into actually more of the hedge fund use cases where it's like, well, I need to work with a panel company, or I need to work with a more reliable, accurate, truth set of data and not just sort of random little buckets, because I could go get this, rebate company that has like promos and has like some of my shoppers, but they're promotion buyers. Like, do I want to go spend $1 million in Meta on these people? Maybe not. So you start getting into these questions around the sources of the data, the quality of the data, which are challenging. And not a lot of these companies have like that. I think that's a misnomer that they have great first party data. There's a lot of companies that just aren't good at first party data or just don't have it.
On the hedge fund side, what are some examples of stocks that hedge funds are using your data for?
Yeah, good question. So we've focused a lot. So a lot of what we focus on is transaction data. And there's a specific class of transaction data that comes from legal filings. And it's around like heavy equipment transactions. So if you think about if you're a hospital, you're buying a new medical device or surgical robot. If you are a farmer buying a new combine or tractor. If you're a contractor and you're buying a new crane, any one of those most likely is a legal filing because you're financing with a bank to get access to this collateral, which is a piece of equipment. So those are technically public records, but practically the access of those, as we know with a lot of legal documents, is hard because every state has their own process. These come in the form of PDFs or TIFFs, and it's unstructured. It's a mess. So this is one area that we've spent a lot of time, and I'll get to answering your question about which stocks, which tickers. But you can probably imagine that we know the buyer, which might be Kaiser Permanente Hospital. We know the lender, which could be Wells Fargo, and we know the product, which could be a Da Vinci robot made by Intuitive Surgical, for example. So those are examples where we see for certain categories and products, we see very high amount of transactions based like just overall coverage. So Intuitive Surgical is a great example of a ticker we have great coverage for. John Deere, another company, Caterpillar, Paccar, Agco, Medtronic, GE Healthcare. So think about big pieces of equipment. So companies that make heavy equipment, and it's for B2B. So that is a space that we've found a really interesting niche to kind of capitalize on the public record fragmentation issue, unstructured data challenge, and then just the fact that you're trying to do this disambiguation of this product or this make or this like John Deere, Ford, whatever name, and trying to map that all the way up to the company. And so that's something that we found some pretty predictive power because we see about 1 to 2 months ahead of earnings, those transactions flow through the data, which allow pretty powerful predictive signal.
Is that to your point about these government filings being a pain to get? I'd imagine it depends on the county where they're filed. Like, do you have better geographic coverage in certain parts of the country versus others?
Yeah, so that was one of the key things is getting national coverage was really important for us. And that's something that took a long time to do and to get. So we do have national coverage there. To answer your question, there are some states where it's very easy. I can just log in to the state and just download the data. It's right there in front of me. Other states, not so much, much harder. So it is, the data sourcing is like a whole animal there. And it is exactly how you described. Some places are easy. Some places are very, very hard.
Shifting gears a little bit to your clients. You're working with marketers, you're working with hedge funds. What have you noticed about selling into those different types of groups? Are some more generous, some cheaper than others? Is the sales process significantly different between them? What have you learned?
Yeah, I'm laughing because it's funny. We started out the business. I was like, yes, hedge funds selling insights. This is going to be the thing. This is going to be awesome. And it's like, it's really hard. It's not a very forgiving group of customers. And I apologize for any of your listeners that take offense to this, but really hard to sell into hedge funds. They're very particular buyers, they know exactly what they want. And so it's challenging. And I will say on the other hand, your listeners will be running to go sell to marketers, a lot more forgiving, to be honest with you, and much bigger budgets because we're dealing with, the marketing budget's set every year. And for some companies, it's billions of dollars. And, you don't need a very big slice of that to try. And then you're in a good spot. So that's why our revenue shift is now larger on the marketing side is because, well, we come from that background naturally, but the budgets are just naturally bigger. And when you have an unfair advantage to data and an unfair advantage to making that data usable, then like it kind of starts to sell itself. And so that's a lot of what we've seen on the marketing side. So we continue though to believe that the hedge fund community pushes us in the right way to think about data and to be like really articulate and really thoughtful about every piece of information flowing through our system. So I think there's a feedback loop that actually makes our infrastructure and product better by the virtue that we started out with it as an insights business selling to hedge funds. But now we've taken that rigor and we've applied that to basically bringing like what's, I would say, questionable data in the marketing ecosystem, but bringing a whole nother lens and angle to that.
How do you think about, exactly to that point, how do you think about accuracy and attribution, whether it's a hedge fund buying it and trying to backtest it to some KPIs or marketers getting returns on their spend? How do you think about quantifying that?
We think about it a lot. And I think the honest truth is it comes down to transparency. And I think I mentioned like a lot of data today, at least on the marketing side, is sort of like, here's this segment on a shelf and it's like you trust it is what it says it is, but you don't have any way to audit that. You can't go into the raw signal and understand the sources and how it became the way it became. It's just you have to trust it. And like that is just not like acceptable to us. Like there's no reason we need to have. I mean, I understand why, because we built this for humans, but now we have machines making all these decisions, and machines need different types of, they need data formatted differently. And there is an expectation of transparency that needs to be an auditability of that data. So that is like one of the hallmarks that we've built into sort of our agents and our workflow, is to make sure that they're being as transparent as possible through the entire process of like, I ask a question of the data, I'm working through it, I have this chat going, and like I can understand and audit every step of the way to build trust in what you're trying to buy. Because at the end of the day, like some of this is emotion. Like I need to feel good about what I'm buying. I need to feel good about what I'm spending $1 million on for this marketing campaign. And then, so that's like on the like, I'm making a decision of what to buy. And then on the back end of like, how do I measure, was this successful or not? You get into challenges there of like sort of walled gardens, and what will they share with you? But the beautiful thing is, if you're talking about data that's created from our transactions, well, we see. Does someone go to McDonald's and buy more at McDonald's? Does someone spend more money at Home Depot? Like we actually see it. We have the measurement. We have a lot of that data that we're sitting on. So that's sort of been part of our focus, is like, what are the events that drive the most meaningful decisions for our company? And a lot of that is based on transactions. So that's really been our focus from a signal perspective, is what data can you build data solutions from, but you also measure on the back end. So you could sort of do both.
And the point that you just mentioned on the transaction side, Cardlytics has been, the big publicly traded company that started off big, that was aiming to do this kind of attribution, to partner with the banks to get the transaction data and to figure out like attribution on advertising for different brands. But they've struggled quite a bit. I was just looking at the stock prices of today, where in June of 26, they're 60 cents down from, I don't know, the peak was significantly, I don't know, the 5-year peak was what, 150 almost.
Yeah.
It was a hard business to get in. I'm curious, how you're thinking about, like, even transactions, which to your point are sort of the gold standard of attribution, and it would still, at least the way that they are executing it, has not been terribly successful. And but at the same time, it seems like it should be extremely successful, because you could get this full visibility on what people are buying beforehand and afterwards. So I'm curious, to how you think about, like, I don't know, like scaling this to this at a larger scale, and whether it's what some of the challenges might be there.
Yeah. We're actually helping a company in the CPG space that is like sort of single source reliant on one data set for a large portion of their business. And they're like, we need, and that's scary, it's risky. And I think that I mentioned that because there's Cardlytics, their power was their relationship with the banks. And so you can imagine, if a big bank pulls out of their network, it's a big deal. I mean, there's other companies very similar to them, I'm sure you're aware of them, that they rely on their sources. And when you get too concentrated with one source, that risk is very real. And so, again, being marketplace guys, like, we've taken the approach that we need is broad. We're always sourcing. Always. There's never enough data is our mentality, because we know that we can't be super concentrated in any one area with any one source. Otherwise, we have that risk that you're talking about, where the business model could be the best model ever, but without data, that's most of the moat these days.
How did you guys come to that conclusion? Did you learn it the hard way at a live ramp, or was it just from the very beginning, where like this, we don't want that kind of high concentration on one data source, so we want to keep it diversified? Because to your point, there
Well,
are a number of companies that are still very reliant on one contract with one data partner.
I know it blows my mind, but I think the problem is what I'm really talking about, is sourcing this data is not easy. Like, this is an art amongst arts, to be able to navigate to these large organizations. Sometimes I've spent over a year trying to work through compliance and privacy, meeting with the executives, making them comfortable with this, just to get a new, like, high quality first party data source. So when we were building LiveRamp's data marketplace, our vision was we want the world's data. We want to monetize the world's data. So we were bringing anyone and everyone that had something to offer, something to bear. This is international as well. We were doors open to the world's data. And so our mentality was, if you can own the supply side, naturally the buy side will follow. And that thesis played true. And so our mentality is you can talk till you're blue in the face about having the best agents and the best this and that and infrastructure, but without good data, it doesn't really matter, you know? And so we've always been a supply first mentality in terms of building any of our products. Our core team has, at least.
I would love to learn just a little bit more about LiveRamp. Like, I'm familiar with the LiveRamp ID, which was aimed to figure out like a privacy compliant way of connecting users across data sets without using their email addresses or names. But it sounds like, yeah, there was a lot more behind that in terms of other data sets, or like, yeah, what's like the short pitch for LiveRamp?
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the most fascinating middleware companies that no one understood. Is sort of the long and the short of it. So, but there's really there's probably more than three main business units, but in my mind, there was three. There is the core identity, which is what you're talking about, the LiveRamp ID, which is what everything was centered around. Like, this is the center of the universe, is this ID, as I can stitch all of my identities and all of my online devices to this one LiveRamp ID. So that's the core. The foundation was their identity. And so the graph that they built to understand that was things they bought, things they rented, things they partnered with, to make this massive graph of all these IDs to resolve to the LiveRamp ID. So huge business. They were the leaders in identity. From that, then there was like logically infrastructure that you would need sort of on top of that, because now you're getting into data sharing, you're getting into taking the IDs plus the attributes tied to them and building audiences. Like, you're getting some insights from this, you're helping data science teams, you're helping measurement. So there's all this infrastructure then that needs to be built around that. And that largely started to focus in on what LiveRamp bought Habu for $200 million a couple years ago, which was a clean room company. Clean rooms are now, very, very very cool. It's, where data, I don't have to share I'm not sharing my core identity with you. That is happening in sort of a safe place, like with gloves on, but I can understand the overlap. If I'm Delta Airlines, I can understand the overlap with Starbucks customers, and no one has to see the underlying PII, but I see the result. I see the answer, the insight, if you will. I'm not sharing raw data with you. You don't see it, but you see the answer. And so that sort of clean room capability of companies being able to share their most valuable first-party data became a capability that lots of enterprise companies were excited about. So the clean room was sort of a second bucket for LiveRamp. And then the third was the business that we built and founded, which was the marketplace business, which started out obviously as nothing, but ended up being close to 25% of LiveRamp's revenue. And that was the sort of business that was where you didn't have enough first-party data, so I needed to attach either additional attributes to my own records, or I just needed to buy basically more people because I didn't have any myself because of my brand, and we just didn't have any first party data at all.
How did you start that business from scratch to build it out to like 25% of LiveRamp's revenue, which I would imagine was like, what was sort of the ballpark revenues that you guys had?
It got up to close to 200 million, probably north of 200 million.
On the whole LiveRamp, or just on the data piece?
Just on the data marketplace.
Oh, wow. How, yeah. What was that like? Did you, that's non-trivial thing to start a $200 million business.
Yeah. So I think that the beautiful thing about a lot of these things, it's like, we weren't the first data marketplace, obviously. So the largest players in the space, they're companies that no longer exist, but Oracle Blue Kai, you may remember that name. They were the largest marketplace in the space. Another company called Crux with a K, they were a large player. Exalate, which was another one. So there was like some of these like legacy players that had data marketplaces, or DMPs, if you will, data management platforms. So these were sort of legacy places. And the mentality was, let's build a neutral marketplace. LiveRamp was all about neutrality. Rest in peace. Now they're owned by Publicis, but that was the whole pitch, is all of these other companies were also selling their own branded data. LiveRamp's not in the business of selling its own data. We are just making data available. So we were kind of the cool guys that came in with, and we also offered better rev share, so better terms to the data owners, and we were neutral. And we also, LiveRamp at that time, had this huge push to basically integrate with every single platform out there. So we had like 500 integrations. It was this huge KPI. You can imagine a gong being rung every time we had a new integration, but like, it was that sort of thing. People running around like doing BD deals all over the place. So we had this massive network to where people could send data. We had killer identity, And then we had this like cool pitch to data owners where we're like the cool neutral guys. Like LiveRamp was a hot company at that time. You wanted to be part of that company. So all those pieces kind of fit together where it made sense for us to start this thing. And that was sort of what we had at the wind at our backs, and we were just kind of off and running.
You mentioned a couple of times that it's very important, also very hard to form these data partnerships with other companies for all sorts of reasons, whether it's economic or legal or privacy. What have you learned in terms of best practices? How should people, if they're thinking about that kind of a partnership, just partnerships more broadly? Like you mentioned a point about being a little bit more favorable from a rev share perspective. Like what's generous, what's stingy, like what's the ballpark of these economic terms that you've seen out there, and how can people make sure that they do things that are more appealing to the other side?
Yeah, I think that, obviously if I'm in the business, let's say pick on Giant Eagle. It's a, regional grocery store. If someone comes to me and is like, hey, Giant Eagle, I want your data. I'm going to go sell it for you. I'll be like, how much you going to pay me? And there's a number that I'll probably take. I'll probably take that and I'll sell you my data. But then I'll just be like, I'm comfortable now because you've given me several $1,000,000 or whatever it is for my data. And I'm like, well, it's on you now. You've basically paid this huge chunk of money up front, and you're just going to, good luck. But those are rare companies. You have to be very well funded to go buy your own data. That was not us. That was not LiveRamp. That's not what we're doing now. The other approach is you have to come in with credibility that you've already built something or that you can. You have to have a story. You have to have real buyers. You have to show them a path of like why partnering on a rev share basis is going to yield it's worth their time and potentially risk. Like this is first party data. This is valuable data to them that they should hand over their Snowflake instance or whatever AWS and, let you give access to that data. So for us, like, I guess in terms of best practices, it's being very transparent with your model. How do you monetize? Who are your buyers? How does it work? Show them the product, have them walk through it with you. Like you need to give them full confidence that you know what you're doing and that you're going to be good stewards of the data. Your contracts have to be rock solid. They can't look sloppy. They have to be very thoughtful. You have to have compliance programs. You have to have all of these things in place because, again, we're talking about highly sensitive data here. So you need to come across as knowing what you're doing. And ultimately, they have to be able to sleep at night. They have to feel good about kind of handing this data over to you. So it's definitely art, but it's also you need some credibility because like you can't just go knock on any of these companies' doors and be like, give me your data. They'll laugh at you. They'll never talk to you.
Yeah. No, it is interesting. Like I was actually talking to a friend who signed one of these rev share deals with a company, and he was in his head thinking he was going to get a 10% commission for selling it, like maybe 20%. And then they came to him and they're like, okay, like let's do like 70-30. And then he's like, okay, that's a lot more than I thought. It's like, great. Didn't even push back. And then when he actually clarified it, the other side wanted to give him 70%. And he's like, oh, holy shit, I thought you were going to give me 30. Like 70 sounds so much better. So I'm curious, like how, if there's like, is there a market for this, or is still like a lot of finger in the air and depending on like?
I mean, you understand the value of data. There's data, and then there's like data.
Yeah.
To me, if someone would come to me offering me 70% to sell their data, I would immediately be like, red flag, your data must not be any good. Like that would be like my immediate thought. It's like, if you don't value your data more than that, like what are you doing? Like to me, anyway. So that comes across as very odd to me. Now, if it's like, and you also run into scale issues. Like there's a lot of companies we talk to that have really interesting data, but the scale is just the juice is not worth the squeeze. So that you got to hit some minimum thresholds for it to be meaningful and useful.
So yeah, like in the world of AI, how do you think about having data as a moat for a business? Is it really what other people hype it up to be, or is it still pretty hard to have a data business even in the world of AI?
No, the data part's absolutely important. I think there's a lot of people give the models maybe a little too much credit. The LLMs, I mean, they're amazingly powerful, but I don't really care if it's Gemini or Opus or what it is. Like an LLM, generally speaking, is very powerful when it comes to the data we're talking about. It's going to be able to do most of the things you need to do. We're not talking about like really high level complex things, especially if we're trying to use it to clean data or do categorization or things like that. But I think really what it comes down to is thinking about the workflow around it. So like the Claude code analogy is like one I like to use is 95% of Claude code is the harness. It's the workflows, it's the context. It is all of the human written stuff wiring around the model itself. You could technically swap out the model. Like the model's not the important part, but it's all the other wiring around it. And so I think similarly for data businesses in our ecosystem, the same analogy applies. It is you need to be able to deal with the data. Like, so there's sourcing, ingestion. There's the disambiguation and the semantics around the actual, like, what is the data? Like it says it's a wine buyer, but like I mentioned before, like, well, like, is it a premium wine buyer? Is it a heavy wine buyer? Is it like, what is it? How do you determine those things? And so a human, when you're bringing those data sets in, especially if you're sourcing, multi-sourcing data, you have to understand the data. Like that's a critical question. Otherwise you throw an LLM at this stuff and it's just going to guess. And what's going to come out the other end is going to look beautiful and highly, like very professionally described, but it's like, it's just a guess at the end of the day, unless you've been super thoughtful about putting all of the harness around the data. And it goes on because you have the actual people trying to operate this. So you have someone like typing and asking questions. I'm looking for Mountain Dew buyers in Texas or whatever. And it's like, well, what does that mean? It's like the last 30 days, last 90 days, like, are they frequent buyers? Are they loyal buyers? Like, what do you mean? And so like, you need to be able to guide someone through this to make sure that they don't just get out like an answer, but it's the right answer they're looking for. So like it's that, and then it's down into the governance, like, and so like all these are bits and pieces that are workflows that you have to build in a sophisticated data business if you're using AI as a core part of it, of which we are, to be able to get trusted responses from this. Because at the end of the day, again, putting my hedge fund hat on, it's like at the end of the day, it's quality and accuracy. Like I have to be able to trust that my AI is giving me the same response every single time, and that it's auditable and that there's governance around it. So I think that the moat is both the data, but it's increasingly the Claude code, if you will, the wrapper that you put around and the workflows, and being very, very thoughtful about that. And it's the domain expertise that any company in these little niches and these little verticals that they build bring into that.
How do you, taking a step back here, like thinking about your entrepreneurship journey, what are some things that end up being harder than you thought they were going to be? What's been easier than you thought it was going to be? How do you feel as you were sort of an entrepreneur within LiveRamp, building a massive business?
That's right.
Now you're doing this on your own. Presumably, you own a larger percentage of your business today. It's like, has it been easier or harder to scale a business outside a large company like LiveRamp?
Yeah, there were a lot of things looking back that, as I was getting frustrated and, large corporate entities, sort of things, it happens to everyone within those companies where, you build something really powerful and you have a lot of success and you start to think about these things. I took for granted how nice it was to basically have a startup within a large public organization. You're well funded, you've got a travel budget, you've got all these nice niceties that are just there and exist. Oh, you need another engineer? Sure, here you go. You're hitting your numbers? Awesome, here you go. I don't have to go like talk to VCs, try to raise capital, fight and scrap for every single deal. So that was sort of a unique situation that we had at LiveRamp, and I look back on that very fondly. It was an amazing and awesome time. Candidly, I'd love to be able to do it again. It was a lot of fun. So, that on sort of, obviously there's cons to that large corporate entity as well, but there were a lot of good things too. Because it allowed us to scale and focus really on the product and the business problem we're trying to solve solely. We weren't distracted by the other things that you have as a startup, and especially as a founder, to deal with, because it's a lot. It's a lot. What HR platform do we have? Is it a PEO? Do we use Gusto? It's like, a new employee in Texas. How do I set up Texas? Like all of these little things that you just have to do that in a big company, you just don't. You have a department that does that for you, or you have an AI that does it for you now. But on the positive side, I think the things that are easier is just no surprise. The amount of work you can get done, and this is partly because of obviously Claude and our different AI tools, is amazing. It is like, that's actually mind blowing. I remember waiting like weeks for marketing to get me something. It's like, I have it in an hour because I did it myself. Now, obviously AI plays a huge role in that, But the amount of innovation and just feeling a sense of accomplishment every day, because there's 1,000 things that you can do to feel productive, is like self-worth that I think it just fills me up. If you could pick out a cup analogy, it fills me up every day, and all of it's to the point where it's just too much. And so that is something that just gives me this energy and passion that is hard to describe, and it helps you navigate the painful things that you don't really enjoy doing, or the deals that take 2 months longer than you expect, or the fundraise that takes an extra 3 months, or whatever it is. But those are all things that I think build out a more resilient and well-rounded individual, but as well as a company that is just weathered to be able to thrive in any sort of environment.
You mentioned pros and cons on both sides of this, and one of the takeaways that AI is changing this a bit. Do you feel like the winners in the near future are going to be large companies that are looking to incubate ideas internally? Or are you still bullish on startups who can now leverage the power of AI to not have to worry as much about the business side of running the startup and can actually
Yeah.
compete with the large players?
It's a good question. And I'm very strongly on one side of that. As we deal with a lot of Fortune 500 companies, are our customers, or they're in the process of white labeling our infrastructure, we see on the inside. And there's a lot of work to be done on the inside. And we are in the early innings of things still. And so I'm still very bullish on startups in this space, finding a niche, solving a specific problem. And I think that people that have sort of left the comforts of their companies and have gone off to start things in this space are very, very well positioned. I don't think that's going to last forever. I will caveat that. I do think we have a window of time, probably 12 to 24 months, that we're kind of going to be hitting some sort of inflection point, I think, in the market. So this is not like a forever thing. And I think it's going to be a case where these companies are going to have to make a decision. Like, are you being built to be bought? Or are you going to be built to sustain and become your own independent thing? But I think the path for companies that are not greedy and see the path to, like, maybe it's a nice home to go to, some sort of corporate enterprise and like continue to build, will be really well suited. And I think there can be lots of very successful companies that take that path if they're pragmatic about things and aren't expecting and aren't so hamstrung by so many VCs that they have to have $1 billion outcome. Then I think they're going to be pretty well set. But there are some companies that, early in the pandemic took a lot of money and are in a different boat. And so I'm thankful that is not us. But so anyway, that's kind of my POV on that.
Yeah, I'm curious. You made that point about some of these Fortune 500 clients of yours that sound like they're much more bureaucratic, slower to do things. What do you think it was about LiveRamp that is different from some of these other large companies that made it easier for you to incubate a product within it?
I mean, it was the founding team and the leadership team was so focused on building and being fast moving. So, we had Oren Hoffman, I'm sure you probably know. We had Annika Gupta, Travis May, like Joel Jewett. Like, these were really smart, thoughtful, like Silicon Valley, like hustlers that just wanted to be successful and build an awesome business. And importantly, a culture. Like, some of my best friends were made at LiveRamp in the early days. And there's some of the most successful people that are very successful people have come out of that organization. I forget how many founders and how many successful startups there are now out of like the LiveRamp, alumni organization, but it's massive. So I think it was all, again, like I sort of mentioned, sort of the moment that allowed the marketplace to be successful, but it was also the moment that allowed LiveRamp to be successful was, again, it was the leadership, it was the people, and I think the market was right, and we had the right go-to-market. So it's rare to have those sorts of companies, and I feel very fortunate to have been part of it because it's definitely shaped how I think about the data economy and how I think about building a business and a team, candidly, as well.
What have you learned about building a team? What do you like or not like to
I
do?
mean, at this point, as I'm an old man with gray hair here, I joke, but I feel older more these days than I used to in the past. I just want to be around good people that I trust, and I think that it starts with everything. Like, that's the first. It's like, yes, can you do the job? Of course, but it's an assumed that you will. But beyond that, you just need to be a good person. I need to trust you, and I need to know that you're gonna hustle as hard as I hustle. And if you check those boxes, I think we're gonna work well together.
I love it. Ben, I also think it'd be cool to check in a few months or years to see where the above data mafia ends up going and what other kinds of companies you guys will incubate. But it sounds like you're building an awesome business, and I appreciate you sharing it with me.
Yeah, this was fun. Appreciate it. Have a good one.